Nithyanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Yanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gaganashadasham Tattvamasyari Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Nithyanandam. Hi, this is Ma Nitya Ovenanda. Thanks for joining me again today. This is the second in the series of the Upanishads, the second volume. So I wanted to talk today more about the authors of the Upanishads. Contradictory to that statement is the fact that the Upanishads are authorless. The beautiful word in Sanskrit used to describe this, apurushatva. That means authorless, immeasurable, incomprehensible, and inexpressible. So all the rishis who actually penned it down, they had that connection with the source, that deep state, the deep connection with the source. From their experience, directly from the source, came the Upanishads. So the Upanishadic rishis, they wrote it down and recorded it, but they did not list all their names because they cannot say that they did it. There's no hint of them in there. It's purely from the cosmos itself. The book is considered to be corruption-free. The knowledge is from the source of the universe. That is the Upanishads. There's no individual who is glorified, and there's no vested interests. Most books today we see have some vested interest, even if it's a scientific research project. A lot of times those researches are funded. So even if they seem like it's factual, that funded research is going to maybe be a little bit swayed here or there depending on who the funder is and how they want the results to be. It's very unfortunate. And even somebody writing history, as we all know, depending on what country you're from and who actually wrote the book, they'll write it from their perspective or how they politically want it to go. So we know that many things written in history are incorrect. But the fact is that the history books that they are teaching the people, the citizens of that time or place, or even today, they're telling them one thing because they want them to believe what they want. The powers that be want them to believe and follow what they're saying. So unfortunately, many cultures, they don't even know their own history properly. I mean, even look at the United States. There's many theories going around that, hey, nobody actually landed and walked on the moon. Neil Armstrong did not land on the moon. There was no moon exploration. And there's many interesting facts. Like if you look at the footprint that they're showing of Neil Armstrong on the moon. And anyway, a footprint on the moon seems weird as it is to me a little bit. It's not like sand, or mud. But the fact that that footprint shown is different than his boot itself. If you actually see his boots, the bottom treads on the boots are different. And also there's a flag blowing in the breeze on a lot of the footage. But is there a wind in space on the moon? So based on the gravity, they're saying that there's no wind or movement of air over there because there's no atmosphere. It's just space itself. So that's why people float in space. I mean, there's no wind or anything. See, Earth has the wind and the elements and the gravitational pull that keeps things in motion and moving. But the moon does not have that. So anyway, these are things that make you go, But we know for sure that the Upanishads were penned down by the rishis. However, they're not claiming anything. They're just channels of that cosmic energy to give us those things, the source knowledge. So it's really beautiful and amazing. And one of the many reasons you can actually look at the Upanishads as a pure truth, the way it's written, because there's no, as I said, vested interest. There's no psychological fear or greed, which usually is involved in writing history. And so none of that is there. It's pure and open to the source itself. And actually, especially, we should only read books like that. Because you think about it, if you read a book, you actually a little bit get swayed by what you're reading, and you kind of start to believe it because you're reading the book, you're reading the supporting evidence. So a little that residue from that author, that person that wrote the book, kind of comes away with you. You can kind of see, especially if you're an avid reader, you read a book, and even you pick up the mood of a book, right? Even if it's a fictional book, you can be reading a certain story, right? It could be a murder mystery or a fantasy or a love story or something that's a very sort of dark kind of book that kind of will put you in a little bit of a low mood. So understand that words have power, books have power. And so when you're reading that, whatever the author has put into that book, you're actually getting a little bit of that residue. And in my own life, I can say there were a couple times I tried to read, let's say, author like Stephen King. I never was into horror books or any of that. But he wrote a couple books that were maybe time period books, or I think I tried to read one that was set in the Middle Ages, because at the time I was interested in those kind of stories. You know, I enjoyed those warrior stories and all that. And any kind of fantasy novels or sci-fi things, I liked that. So I always heard how great Stephen King was. And I tried to read one of his books, and I don't even know if I finished one chapter, because just the whole book had such a dark kind of tone to it, and such a, the mood of the book was not something that I enjoyed. It put sort of even a physical feeling of like an unease, an unwellness I felt when I was reading the book. So I stopped reading it. And only maybe one other time I read some page or two, but I just decided I'm not interested in that kind of a book. It doesn't have any enrichment for me. The story itself isn't an interesting story for that reason. So I never read it. So just as in my own personal example, when you read a book, those words and that author and what you're putting into the book, you will take away that residue. So in the same way, the Upanishads, they're basically written from such a pure space. There's no vested interest. There's no greed, no fear, nothing but pure consciousness, basically writing those books, coming from the source, Sadashivatva. So when you read those words, they actually cleanse you. There's actually a power behind it to experience the truth within those books. And then when you have somebody like Swamiji, His Holiness Paramahamsa Nithyananda, relating and sort of giving you that translation of what the verse is saying, you know, it's like a whole new actual spiritual experience that you're having. And every verse has such a deep meaning. I mean, even days Swamiji spoke about those books. Even, I'm sorry, not those books, but those verses. Even one verse that's maybe 4 or 5 lines, even 2 lines, 1 line. Days he can spend talking about it. It has such a deep meaning and influence on the being level. So there's such powerful books, the Hindu scriptures and the Upanishads themselves. That's why Swamiji again is encouraging us to get into reading those again. And I was very blessed to be around the ashram at the time when he went through the Ishavasya Upanishads. So that's why I'm taking the time to sit and explain these things in a simple way, because I like to share that with you. Because I think people can benefit, especially seekers, people interested in Hinduism, people interested in ancient texts. I mean, all that stuff is there. It's like, especially anybody out there who's a sci-fi geek or a fantasy geek, if you really get into reading some of this stuff, it is a fantasy in a way. But the beautiful thing is it wasn't. I mean, it was actual real people living like that in that time. There's so much proof of it. There's so much evidence. And the evidence is passed down through the ages by all these living masters, these avatars, these gurus, these incarnations of Hinduism, who have experienced these very same things. And if we're lucky, they wrote about it in their own biography or autobiography. They've wrote about those experiences so that we can have them today. In Bhagavad Gita, written, copied down from Krishna's mouth to Vyasa, he recorded all of that. And it's amazing. And so we have that today to understand all of the great masters, and this stuff is being again and again reiterated. You can't say back in those times that this guy knew that guy across India and they got together and made up some story and cooked it up and both told the same thing. No, they didn't even ever meet half the time. But again and again and again, you can see the correlation between all of this data and all of these stories and all of the lives of these great rishis and these great masters and incarnations that lived on planet Earth. And they did all of this research, and this is what Hinduism is about. And it's amazing, and it is like such a fantasy, because here we are today with Swamiji, a living avatar of Sadashiva. And he now is reviving all of this stuff, creating again this time on planet Earth. Because actually we are at a critical time, which you may not realize, because we get stuck in our daily life, here to there, 9 to 5, job, family, all the things because to us that is our world, that is our reality. And we get into that mode and we kind of lose a little bit sight of the bigger picture of the world. But if you look at the things that are going on, there's a lot of, things that could be looked at a negative consciousness in the earth, in the planet Earth. So we need to counter that, and then eventually raise everybody, because everybody deserves and is here actually to become enlightened. Every human being is here on planet Earth to become enlightened. That is the ultimate purpose. So by reviving the ancient tradition, the Sanatana Hindu Dharma, and reviving all of these yogic powers like Swamiji is teaching and initiating people into, little by little, we are raising the consciousness of planet Earth. And there's people out there who don't want to see that happen. They want people to live in darkness. They want people to be controlled because they think somehow that is life for them. I don't know. I actually can't quite understand why another human being would want to control another human being. You can say they want it for money or power or land or fame or this, that, I don't know, some religion or whatever, but I still can't really comprehend it. I really can't. Why, maybe on a smaller level here and there, you can see why you would want to control the situation or this or that. I don't know. But actually taking a civilization of people and wanting to control them and keep them in stupidity, and one of the big things I can think of is basically our industry today, the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry. How they're going hand in hand. They're putting this crappy food and chemicals in all the food. So then people need to go to the doctor and take these pills. And then because these pills are making them sick also, the medical field and the doctors and the hospitals are getting money also. So it's like this weird cyclical creepy thing that's going on. Because there's obviously proof that there's other methods, positive methods, and things that are healthy for the environment, for the body, and for people. So I'm digressing a little bit, but we are talking about an important thing, an important component of life. So I wanted to share it with you, these Upanishads. And I'd like you to just start looking at it, as you have time, start looking through the source book. All the things that I'm talking about now are in the source book of the Upanishads that Swamiji spoke about. And then we'll get into the verses and what Swamiji said about them. So anyway, I'm glad you joined me again today. And just really start to consider what an interesting and amazing culture, an amazing lifestyle, an amazing land India is. So thank you for joining. Have a great day, Nithyananda.